Sup y'all, I'm Hope, and thank you for coming to my TED Talk. We will be discussing gender identity, why it is important, what we can learn from gender identity, and also what I believe we all need to do in order to progress with trans rights, non-binary rights, and I hope that you will take something away from this. I will be sharing a bit of my personal journey, but without further ado, let's begin. So I'm going to start talking about plastic glass chandeliers. So when I was 3 years old, my grandparents had this beautiful plastic chandelier in their living room. And I was always amazed when I would shine a flashlight on it and I just see the entire room fill up with rainbows. Now, as you can imagine, seeing shoes like this that have the ability to, just create rainbows at a whim, just immediately, I was fascinated by that. I wanted these shoes. And this was the first time in my life that my mother said to me, "Those are girls' shoes." Now, like many of us, I grew up watching a lot of TV. And one thing that I memorized quite well was the advertisements that were on TV. I'm pretty sure we were all able to see something along the lines of this. This is what girls like. They like pink. They like Barbie dolls. And me being a small kid, I thought to myself, well, girls must really, for some reason, I don't know what, but girls must really want to dress up. And they must also really want to take care of their children, right? That is something that they want. That's what women do. There's something in their brain that has to work, because that's the message that I was getting. I thought that that's what women want. Now, me on the other hand, being a guy, I thought that I would really like to do something when I grow up that's filled with action, something with cars, something with guns, something insane. So I'm pretty sure we can also all relate to this kind of image of masculinity. Here we can see the little boys learning how to do work, not something domestic. But yeah, I just accepted that as a reality. So one thing that we can take away from this is that our society has created a quite binary form of gender. We have both the male and the female. Females, for some odd reason, like pink, and guys like blue. Don't ask me why, that's how it happened. And there are, of course, also some societal traits. Like, for example, girls have long hair, girls like pink, girls shave their legs, and they should stay thin because that's what men like sexy. Now, men, on the other hand, they should have short hair, they should like blue, they should not cry, because that's something that girls do, and they should also not wear girls' clothes. This was something that I simply accepted. But if you think about that, boys are not supposed to cry because that makes them act like girls. That's misogynistic. I mean, why is something that a girl does wrong for a guy? Unless we're assuming that being a girl for some reason is bad. Well, when you look at TV and and you see a lot of trans folks, one thing that you will notice quite easily is that it's often presented as trans people are people that are stuck in the wrong body. They either are men who are stuck in the bodies of women, or they are women stuck in the bodies of men. And that's how I grew up. This is how I understood being trans was. And this is quite a narrow-minded, limited view of transness and gender. Because what I learned from that is that there are a few people in the world that for some awkward reason, want to change their body because they feel like they're the other gender. Now, I'm going to talk a bit about gender dysphoria, because this is one thing that you will easily recognize. When people are talking on TV, they say they feel gender dysphoria. This is the urge of being in the wrong body. And what we think, or what many straight and cis people think, is what it means is, if you have gender dysphoria, you just want to be in the another body. It's not that simple. You see, it's not simply having the urge to be in a different body. It's actually distress that is felt within oneself. This means that either you feel, and it's also on a spectrum, you either feel a bit uneasy being in in your body. That means you're not really that comfortable being either a male or a female. But it can also mean that you are actually feeling great physical and emotional pain because you're stuck in the wrong body. There's a spectrum, and everybody experiences it a bit differently. But what is absolutely common and associated with gender dysphoria are different types of dysphoria. For example, we have chest dysphoria. That is the dysphoria felt or an emotional pain that having either boobs or having no boobs. We might also have bottom dysphoria around the genitals, having incorrect genitals. We have voice dysphoria, that the voice is either too high or too low. We also have height dysphoria, that one feels that one is too short or too tall. And we of course also have hair dysphoria, the lack or the presence of facial hair, which can cause some emotional distress for some folks. Right. And that brings me to gender euphoria, because this is something that I believe is not discussed enough. Gender euphoria is feeling euphoric about one's gender. And for the most part, that means if you, for example, are a trans man, and all of a sudden you see that you are developing facial hair, pardon me, then you are feeling happy. It's a kind of euphoria that is hard to describe. I would say it's like finding out that you've just won the lotto because you are finally feeling at ease with yourself. You're not having an internal conflict. Now, going back to TV, a famous example and a famous trans person you might know is Caitlyn Jenner. She transitioned from being a man into a woman. And to be honest, that's amazing. We need to have more of this kind of presentation either way. But what I don't like about this is that this is always the first thing that people think of when they hear the word trans. You see, when they hear the word trans, they believe it's just changing from one binary gender into the other. That means that, of course, all the traits that come with being a man are being immediately transferred to the other gender. So that means if you are a guy, if you're a trans man, all of a sudden, when you transition into being a guy, you're no longer allowed to, wear nail polish, wear skirts, wear dresses. You have to be tough, and this kind of, transitioning seems kind of off. Because I thought to myself, well, why do you want to be a guy then? So, one thing that many straight people and cis people don't actually know about is that many trans folks actually transition, but they still continue to wear skirts, wear makeup, stay thin, or they might not adapt long hair if they're, for example, a trans woman. But why am I discussing this? Because it effectively boils down to why do we as a society determine why our genitals are the main factor of our hair length, of our clothing, of our makeup, of our hobbies, maybe even our career choices. Why do we as a society dictate that? And I think most of it has to do with how we as a society have to find these gender roles. And this is where it gets interesting. Now, many of you have probably heard of the gender spectrum, or that there are an infinite amount of genders. And most of us will probably be able to identify with either the extreme end of the gender spectrum. But gender can be anywhere on the spectrum. It can be here, it can be on both ends, it could be somewhere here, or it could be all of them at once. It could be here, it could even change over time, we call that gender fluid. Or you could be not on the spectrum entirely, or you could invent a completely new gender. This is what we call non-binary, and that's something what I am. It's not on either end of the binary spectrum, but it's somewhere in the middle, or I'm actually not sure. This is an umbrella term used to describe everything I've just explained. And it is really important that we get this straight, because, well, I'll get to that. The definition of transgender, or what is becoming more popular, is that your sex does not assign your sexual identity at birth. And I think that is better than just saying transgenderism is changing from one gender to the other. Because if you think about it, how do we determine gender? Now, some people might say it's very simple. We have the typical XX and the typical XY chromosome. Well, 1% of the population, about 1%, is neither XX nor XY. In fact, there are cases where you have an XXY chromosome, and there are also cases where supposed women turn out to have an X and a Y chromosome, and supposed men have an XX chromosome. So, well, what is gender in that case? Well, these people are intersex. That means that they are born without the XY or the XX chromosome. And one thing that I would really like to mention before I continue is, in Germany and many other nations across the world, intersex people, as soon as they're born, get a surgery that either changes their genitalia to either being a penis or a vagina. And there is no medical need for that. There simply is no medical need for that. Imagine if your parents, when you were born, said, I do not like the genitalia of my child, I want it to be the genitalia, and thus the gender role that I'm going to assign them. Imagine that. That is not okay. It simply is not okay. And it's not excusable. So I would actually call for you to maybe, if you get the opportunity to take part in an election or in a discussion where this debate comes up, to actually say, no, it's not okay. Because I say, as long as there's no medical reason to change somebody's genitalia or to perform an operation, it should not be done. Okay. Gender is determined by your genitalia. That is also a very common argument I hear. Well, I'm going to ask you, what happens if you lose your genitalia? Let's just say you're a soldier and you go to war, or you're in an accident, or you have a disease, and you lose your genitalia. Does that turn you into a woman? No, it doesn't turn you into a woman. Losing your genitalia does not turn you into a woman. So, how come that trans men in society are not viewed equally to men or to other folks that do not have the correct genitalia? If you are a man, or you identify as a man, what is preventing you from going to the men's bathroom? There's nothing. Where on the spectrum would we place people with an XX chromosome but a male body, and people with no correct or lost genitalia? It's stupid, it's arbitrary. We should just let the people choose on where and how they want to define themselves. Right. Now I'm going to talk just a little bit about common transphobic statements. A very common thing that I hear is that you're being trans or you're being non-binary just because you want attention. Okay. If I wanted attention, I most certainly would not think months about what I am. I could, if I wanted attention, jump off a building. I could set the school on fire. There are a million ways of getting attention. But challenging your gender identity is usually not one of them. Now, there are trans people that need attention, but transness itself is not a reason why people want attention. In fact, I've not actually openly said that I'm non-binary, but now I've said it, and I did that because I wanted to avoid attention. Right. Another common thing that we hear is it's a fetish. People like to cross-dress because that arouses them. Well, like I said, one of the reasons why we feel aroused by, for example, a man wearing a skirt would be because it's something that we do not associate with a gender role, or we associate it with a gender role we are attracted to. But there is simply no reason why a piece of clothing, in and of itself, should do that. It's not a fetish, it's more something that people would like to wear and should not be limited to wear simply because of their genitalia. A very common and dangerous transphobic statement is that trans people do it because they are predators. Now, if you've been paying attention to the news, Nebraska and Arkansas tried to pass a bathroom bill which forces people to use the gender that they were assigned at birth with, to use the bathroom with the gender that they were assigned at birth with, and that would force trans people to use the incorrect bathrooms. Now, what does this bathroom bill do? Well, I want you to think about what this actually means if we were to implement these bathroom bills here in Germany. You would need to bring your birth certificate to the bathroom to prove that you're the gender that you are. And Also, it would force people that have successfully transitioned to the other gender, or to a different gender, to use the incorrect bathroom. Like, why do we do that? Also, another point, we are able to share bathrooms with gays and lesbians, and we're not afraid that they are going to sexually approach us, simply because people just need to use the bathroom. And although there might be a slight increase that some predators are going to use transness as a way to gain access into bathrooms, there is simply no recorded case of this happening. There are, however, many reported cases of trans people being assaulted in the bathrooms that they were forced to go into, or having infections in the reproductive systems because of them withholding to go to the bathroom. This is insanity. We should not allow this to happen. Right. Another thing that is also often said is being trans is just a phase. It's something that will go by. Now, in Germany, you have to get a doctor's note that you are actually trans or that you're experiencing a physical discomfort with your body in order to apply for something, in order to change your gender. This is done in part to make sure that the people that are suffering from transgender issues are able to have enough time to think about their choice. This also quite upsets me, because this is something that many people do not openly, but they do it quietly. They question their gender identity quietly because being open about your gender identity can be dangerous in certain areas of the world. If your family, for example, finds out about that, they might ignore you. Luckily, that didn't happen. But it is something scary, and it is usually something that people are quite certain about before they come out. So saying it's just a phase to a person that says my gender identity is different from that I was born with is, well, a bit ignorant. Right. Another thing that you will often hear is you'll regret transitioning, or you'll regret ever having said that. Again, there are few cases of people actually regretting their transition, but that's about 1%. And if anything, if we have people regretting their transition, then we should spend more money investing into research in this subject so that we can make sure that people are getting the right treatment and are not going to regret it. But by simply banning people of getting access to treatment that they need, that is insanity. Okay. There are two other ways that people often are transphobic. That is by either dead naming or misgendering someone. Dead naming is if you use somebody's old name, for example, if we have Alex and they were called Charlie before that, calling them Charlie on purpose, just to make them feel uncomfortable, would be dead naming. And misgendering is if you use the incorrect pronouns or refer to them with the wrong gender, just to make them feel uncomfortable. And of course, it may happen if you have a loved one who has openly come out as trans that you might misgender them on accident. But just be aware that getting this correct is kind of important. Okay, so you might be wondering, well, what can I do as a person that is maybe not trans themselves? Well, one thing that you can do is, of course, use the preferred pronouns and use the preferred name. But what I also think is really important is that at the end of your name, made in an email or in a letter, just put your preferred pronouns at the end of it. Like, for example, if you, I don't know, if your name is Yuzuru Yama. Oh. What happened? Oh, there we go. Okay, so let's just say your name is Yuzuru Yamada. You can just put the pronouns that you would like people to use with you at the end of it. You don't even need to be trans to do this. I'm very certain that many of us use the pronouns he or she, and if you just put that at the end of it, people are going to be more comfortable to use them. It's really important that we do this, because many people now believe that if you just put the pronouns at the end of your name, you're trans. But if everybody does it, it becomes normal. Right. I've come to the end of my speech. I just want to put up a little conversation that I had in WhatsApp with a person when I first came out to them. And I just think this is a good example of what we should do if somebody comes out as trans. So I'll read that for you. I'm coming out of the closet again. What? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hope, for
Can we
your
ask questions?
yeah. I just want to first say thank you so much, Hope, for your presentation. I'd like to give another round of applause.